Welcome to Take It from the Ironwoman. My name is Susanne Müller, your host and the Ironwoman. This podcast is about empowering yourself and others to make real changes in the world. You will hear from everyday, smart, sophisticated, hip people like you and me. Not everybody has to be an Ironwoman to impress the world. Together, we will learn from the sports and business leaders how you can become a more successful person as an entrepreneur or a leader. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. Take your steps now. Take your big steps now. Join me on this journey to success. This podcast is being sponsored by Get Loopy. On episode 41, you can hear the story of Isabel, the co-founder and CEO. Get Loopy, get a 20% discount off your first order. GetLoopy.com. Take it from the Ironwoman. Again, we have a special guest, and today we're even going to New Zealand. So we have Mark Kroening with us. I know him from the Columbia coaching program. Columbia coaching alumni have offered coaching sessions or check-in sessions, and that's how we met. Just give a little introduction. Who is Mark, who's joining us today on our podcast?
So, Mark Kroening. I'm a leadership and organizational effectiveness coach. Until recently, I was based in the United States. In these times, I've moved home back to New Zealand to be closer to family. Figuring out next steps and seeing where I plug into New Zealand as a next step in my journey.
Mm-hmm. That's good. And on the LinkedIn profile, obviously we're going to share that, it says in service of people and planet. So tell us a little bit more about that. It's very intriguing, at least to me.
Yeah, so in short, I see my purpose as contributing to change or the transition to a socially equal and environmentally sustainable world. Mm-hmm. And really, I don't see anything more important in terms of how I contribute to the world than that. So whilst recognizing on the opposite side of contribution, there's nurturing. So nurturing myself and my relationships and community and those types of things, that's also important. But in terms of an outward contribution, that's what I'm focused on.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, yeah. Talk a little bit about New Zealand and the sustainability part. I think to me, it seems like New Zealand is a very forward-thinking country.
That is a very interesting topic. And I think like anything, there's at least two sides to it. So on the pro side of it, yes, New Zealand is forward-thinking. It is luckily much more dynamic because of its size. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a real culture and spirit around respect for each other, enjoying our outdoors. There's this idea of like, using a piece of number 8 wire. So like kind of just figuring it out and getting it done when perhaps, we could maybe be a little more thoughtful from time to time. But so I think there's definitely that positive side of it. Unfortunately, like all countries and all economies do have economic drivers that are causing us to have practices that are destructive to our environment and maybe not all sectors of society. So there is the other side, and in many ways that's the thing that I'm excited to contribute to here in New Zealand. There is, going back to the other side of the coin, there are a large number of people and organizations that are looking to make real change in this space. Mm-hmm. So it is an exciting time, I think, to be in New Zealand.
I think so. Certainly when you look at the Prime Minister, me as a woman, I think she is the super role model, super cool woman. So I've been following her and just kudos to her, what she has done. I don't think it's easy, but certainly she takes the risks and she's outspoken.
I would add to that, or the thing that really sets her apart from me is that she leads with empathy. Mm-hmm. And a degree of vulnerability, and perhaps they go hand in hand. That as a leadership coach is all those two things as a leadership coach, I would call out as being critical for the success of any leader and the success of any organization that they're contributing to. I'm impressed. And she's a year younger than me, which is even more impressive. She is young, but talented.
Very talented, yeah. And obviously I've read a few articles on her leadership style, and they say, yeah, you know, they almost criticize her that she's too empathetic. But I think that's what we need at this point, that she comes on Facebook and she's comfortable talking to many levels. Probably she speaks differently when she talks to head of states versus when she's on Facebook Live in her training outfit and stuff. But I think that's where you see the strong leaders, right? They can adapt and speak to the people at home, and you feel connected to her.
Yeah, and again, sort of looking at the contrast, if we think about what we've known of leadership, you know, through the Industrial Revolution and sort of the current time, it's been dominated by men. It's been, you know, it came out of potentially like ideas around conquering and war historically. And, you know, none of those things are inherently human. And I think some of those ideas have driven, you know, all of our multinational corporations and the activities and growth and sort of competition and dominance that they strive for. And look where it's gotten us.
So a lot of people say, and I'm originally from Switzerland, also a small country with 8 million people at the moment. I don't know, how many do you have in New Zealand?
Just crossed over 5 million.
Oh, okay. So small too, right? So people say, like, if you have a relatively small country, it's easier to make changes and move forward, versus when you look at Cairo, Egypt has 20 million people, just a city, or Lagos or Mexico City, 20 million people in one city. It's just unbelievable. So, yeah. What I'm curious about is, like you say, you want to be part of the change. So what is one step or one baby step that you can take now? Obviously, you told me you've been in the US for 15 years. So what are you taking with you that you think you can implement in New Zealand?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. And honestly, I could talk about this for hours. The headline is, I, for myself, have made decisions on how I think change happens. And there's many frameworks and ideas that I've picked up, you know, in my time in the US, whether it was specific to my time in the US and going to graduate school in the US, working in the US, or whether it's just sort of part of my maturity as a person. Maybe that's hard to separate. But to sort of add a color to how I think change happens, and drawing from the very simple concept that Simon Sinek has, you know, starting with why. So that's to say that I think purpose is oftentimes not front and center with the actions that we're taking. And I think that almost by definition means that our actions aren't the right ones, or likely aren't the right ones. Or, said another way, what we're doing is unlikely to get us to where we would like to go, because we're not anchoring strongly enough on a purpose. That is the thing that, again, sort of bringing it back to my coaching for a moment, that is where I start with anyone with whom I'm in a coaching relationship with, is getting a lot of clarity, one, in their purpose, and then two, why a purpose is so important for them to have, to hold, and be able to refine and then use as a tool or a filter for almost anything that they're considering, whether it be trying to decide where they want to head towards, or on a more immediate level, do they take this action or another?
And obviously, since March, people have been working from home. Have you seen any changes with your coaching or with your coaching style even?
Yeah. So my primary interest in coaching or a method of delivery is in person.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's, two things to that. One, I can't do that. So that's a reality. And so I've had to get comfortable with, and I spend many hours on virtual, fortunately, video conferences. Obviously, that's better than a phone call.
Yeah.
But it is insufficient and incomplete, and there's a whole bunch of science around why that is. So that's sort of one thing on the negative side of remote working that I'm grappling with.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, it's also has been an enabler in that there's much more appetite for acceptance of virtual communication, and I found people to be generally more accessible previously. But I do have some trepidation around the lessons that we're taking out of remote working, because I don't think, a person, unless they have understanding of the psychology and academic knowledge around this, their evaluation of the benefits might be overstated and the costs understated. And so we could make decisions moving forwards which make sense on some dimensions. And if we take commuting and those types of things, they have a positive environmental impact. But there's a question over our, the psychological impact and where is the sweet spot? Like clearly we're across the threshold historically to being too structured and trying to make everyone the same, do things in the same ways, be fair, and all of these misunderstood ideas. But where's the sweet spot?
And in today's time, nobody has an answer, and we cannot go back when we always say lesson learned or we learn from history, right? So I feel like as a coach, you have to be super empathetic these days. You have to be more flexible. And it's more about the human element versus maybe before you would be like leadership development, promotion, results. So it has become a little more softer, I would say.
Yeah, and that raises a really important point for me, sort of as someone who leads a conversation, or more broadly, as someone who facilitates groups of people in a conversation or in pieces of work. There's such a tension, and I don't know whether it's real or imagined, but a tension between sticking to the script and getting through the work that you think that you're supposed to do, or something that we speak about in lots of different realms about throwing away your agenda, releasing the agenda to sort of let what needs to happen. I feel a constant tension with that all of the time. And then trying to have the awareness to separate into at least two categories. A conversation or a meeting is, quote unquote, a nice conversation, which is the thing that you would want to redirect away from, because it's nice to have and it's part of being a human. But like if it's just a conversation, it has no substance or direction, it tends to not be very productive. On the flip side, and it could be a very similar conversation, but if there's real meat there that is conveying a root issue or concern that really does need processing and space, then that obviously needs, well, not obviously, but from my experience, it does need to happen, and then needs to be space provided for that, and acknowledging that a predetermined structure for a conversation or a meeting may not be that important in that.
I mean, I've seen that with people who are new to working from home, that it is a challenge. And I had a client who's like, yeah, I'm always working from home. I don't know what you're talking about. So then I said to him, well, but look at it as this is your advantage of sharing with others. How have you always worked from home? So people can ask you questions. So it's that sharing piece. And I thought that was a valuable conversation or a coaching moment.
Yeah, and there's one thing that I'd also like to draw attention to in this area. So obviously having a virtual conversation, like, I'm in New Zealand, you're in the United States, would not be possible not that long ago. And again, sort of not to be negative, but just to sort of be aware of what the costs are to that, or the other side of the coin. So yes, it enables this conversation, but what am I not doing instead? So using the example of doing in-person coaching as a very specific example, I think that there's a lot of content in that around a person doing their work where they are, where they live, and how important it is for us all to be contributing to our immediate surroundings, both in terms of community and economy, and all of those types of things. Because it is my belief that if you could imagine the world where we're all putting quite a lot of energy into where we live, at least those two things in terms of contribution and economy, I truly believe our whole world would be better off. I think that there's an inherent disconnection when we have too much connection too far away in terms of like our supply chains and our network and where we're trying to influence, and the context that we lose through doing that. It's not front and center enough for me that there's a cost to doing that. So the headline there is obviously think global, but act local. Yeah. Thank you very much.
We have a podcast every Monday, every Wednesday. Chime in, like us, and don't forget to order your Get Loopy. GetLoopy.com. You get 20% off your first order. GetLoopy.com. Take it from the Ironwoman. Thank you for listening.